The way we are starting with items going back, yeah.
I'll start, Anu, or
Yes, good to start.
yes. Good evening, everyone who has joined from different parts of the HR community and also others who has found time for this lovely occasion. NHRD Chennai chapter proudly welcomes the esteemed dignitaries, guests, and members who have joined for the session Building Diverse Talent Pool. Today we have with us speakers from various areas of expertise and moderator who holds immense years of experience. It's a pleasure and honor to invite Amardeep Devdasan, Senior VP, Operations R&R Donley. He's experienced and successful leader with over 20 years of experience across a diverse industry spectrum. He has set up and run high performance global operations and has continued to lead practices across geographies. An early adopter and power user of all things tech, he is a digital transformation expert. He is a certified leadership and executive coach with a significant experience in working with millennial leaders and women leaders. Now, I'd also invite the speakers for today, starting with Ms. Chandani Kamal, Global Head DNI at CL. She is a human resource professional with 20 years of experience in various facets like diversity and inclusion, compensation, benefits, rewards and recognition, performance management, employee engagement, employee experience, HR operations, policies, legal compliances in both factory and corporate. She is also the recipient of Are You in the List Award for the Young Future HR Leaders in 2014. Moving on to the next speaker, she is Nandini Sarkar, Global DNI Leader at India Boeing, with over 2 decades of HR experience, being a culture curator and an inclusion strategist. She had deep and wide exposures in the domain of L&D, OD, leadership excellence, mentoring, culture building, and change management. Her efforts have led way to many recognitions like Women's Super Achiever Award, 100 Top Global DNI Leaders, Asia's Most Innovative DNI Leaders, to name a few. Next, it's my pleasure to invite Tina Vinod, Global Head DNI at Thoughtworks. She is a feminist at heart with a strong belief that an inclusive organizational culture brings about the best in teams and individuals. She drives the Diversity and Equity Inclusion Charter at Thoughtworks Global. In 2019, she won the Trailblazer Award in Diversity, her Rising Award by Jobs for Her for rising as a women leader in 2019. Welcome, ma'am. Next, I would like to invite Smita, Head of Marketing at ANSR, talking about her journey. She's a highly motivated, visionary, and performance-driven marketing executive with over 17 years of success in developing highly successful and award-winning marketing programs for the technology services industry. Welcome, everyone. The session's over to you, Mr. Amardeep.
Amar, can you try now, please? No? Okay.
All right, thank you for that. Anu, you achieved what's very hard to do, shut me up. But now that you've unmuted me, let the madness begin. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Hello and welcome, everybody. And wow, what a panel we have here today. If there ever was this much of D&I firepower, I'm almost intimidated on today's call. But I'm also very, very excited because if there's one thing that we know is that diversity is no longer a nice to have. Diversity is no longer something we talk about in the abstract. Diversity has over the years come to become a complete business imperative. There's enough data out there to talk about how diverse and inclusive teams do better for the bottom line, all of that. And we all found that to be true. It's now empirical for, I think, everyone in this room. I think what's really important is that diversity has started to make business sense. There are business models that are based on diversity. There are business models that are based on opening up a workforce, destroying boundaries to ensure that companies have access to a talent pool. So that's what today is all about. Today is all about building a diverse talent pool. And I think that's only step one. In order to build a diverse talent pool, you need to be able to have the right frameworks. You need to be able to have the right mindset. Your organization needs to be prepared. There are hygiene factors in the form of policies. There are hygiene factors in the form of processes. And fundamentally, there needs to be a solid top-down intent about doing things differently. And I think that's why we live in a very exciting time as leaders, because organizations are truly looking at diversity, inclusion, equity as strategic imperatives and looking at them as key components of building a successful business. The objective for today's discussion is to talk to these leaders that we have on the panel today, understand from them what it is that they're doing, what it is that they are most excited about, without, of course, giving away any trade secrets, what it is they're excited about, what it is that makes their organization special, and what they're doing proactively to take the appropriate action to have access to a talent pool. So with that, as a preamble, I'm going to throw this open to someone who's an unfair advantage, right? I saw her LinkedIn feed this morning, so I know she's very, very busy. I'm going to open this up by going to Smita. Smita, you're in the middle of a brand refresh, right? So I mean to put you on the spot a little bit, but I'd like you to tell the audience, what are the two things that you do at ANSR that's different? What are the two things that you believe help you create access to a diverse talent?
So I'll tackle the second part of the question. I think that makes it, a lot more. I think it's an easier answer to answer than the first one. So I think the first one that I look at, what's so different, or what is it that kind of differentiates us when compared to some of the other organizations that I see, is about 35% of my leadership team are women. And I think that's a big number, especially in your senior leadership team, right? So I think for me, that is, a clear walking the talk about, looking at executives having diverse thought process, ensuring that we have representation, we're able to bring in perspectives. And I think that is key for me. That's one. The second is also about, Answer is in the business of actually helping corporations or enterprises set up their global capability centers or global shared services, captives, shared services centers. It's got many names. And what we do as part of the policy, and when we help these enterprises come and set up their operations in India, we also work with them in building their policies. Because you can't just lift and shift a policy back from your HQ, right? You need to localize it, one, to meet requirements of the regulations that you have here, and two, also to look at, what would really work with building a workforce that is truly empowered and will be extension of your home office. And in most cases, what we've seen is enterprises today don't see D&I as an afterthought. When they are looking to set up a GCC, D&I happens to be core fabric to how they see it. And let me take an example. Lululemon, it's a very strong athleisure brand, right, in the market. And that brand set up its operations last year in about September, October timeframe. And, and they're already at about close to about 2x the ratio that you see, about 2x. The typical that we get to see in the GCC world is about 20-25%. They're close to about 2x in terms of the male to female ratio. They've also made conscious efforts in terms of looking to hire only women and not lowering the bar just because you want to have a women candidate. That is very key and that's very critical. Second, they're also looking at what can they get from the community, right? LGBTQ+, because as an organization, they've got a fair amount of representation right at the board level from the community globally. So they're looking at that. And they also want to ensure that technology, which was at the lower 8-10% across the world, they're looking to up that and look at, getting close to about 60-70% like how their stores are, which has a lot of women. So taking those, and I see each and every one of them are also looking at diversity and inclusion to be key. Also, what it's done for them is it's given them other alternate pools from where they can go and hire from. So earlier, you would just hire from Bangalore, right? Now you're looking at women in tier 2, tier 3 cities. You're also looking at people from the community in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and you're giving them opportunities. You're looking at, women returning to work after a career break. You're looking at a girls only campus recruitment program. You're looking at a fast track technology program like some of our other GCCs are doing, where they've got a certain set of roles that they have, they are looking at women to come back and fill. So interesting times, even on the GCC side, they understand that it's something that they don't want to be doing at year 2 or year 3, like the way they typically did many years back. They look at going at diversity and inclusion right from day one. And it could be a brand like Lululemon or even a traditional brand like 3M, which has very clear metrics on the percentage it needs to meet month on month to actually meet those diversity and inclusivity ratios. So interesting trends. It's no more pockets. I think it's become mainstream, and I only see that it will be moving up and beyond from here.
Thanks, Smita. Very, very helpful. First off, congratulations on that 35%. That's massive. Also, what I'm really excited about to hear is how you're encouraging or helping your clients as they set up their operations, their GCCs or GCICs here, help them create those frameworks that allows them to be to access a diverse talent pool right from scratch. Thank you for that. Before I pass the question on, I'm going to let all the participants know you can ask your questions in the chat window. I'll try and summarize them for the panelists. I think Lakshmi Narasimhan has asked, does diverse talent include people who are differently abled? Short answer, yes, and we will address that during the course of the discussion. Thanks for that, Smita. Let me just pass this over to Chandani. Chandani, you spent a lot of time in different departments of HR, right? How important is the right policy framework in order for an organization to create and maintain and even grow a diverse talent pool?
Right. I think you're right. I think the policies are somewhere which is the base that forms, because everyone kind of goes back to the policy saying this is how it works. Because anything like a change management is not easy, right? It's very difficult for us to accept saying, okay, why do we need? I think we still have questions. We all understand that D&I is a business imperative, but still when you get onto the operational level, people still have a question saying why. I'm not being biased. So probably there is something like an unconscious biases that we don't really understand. And sometimes we don't understand this is a bias that we had. Probably I'll still have a question saying, oh, this is a travel role, so will I want a woman there or not? Probably she's a woman, she just had a baby, so she may not be the right candidate. But it's not for you to decide, it's for you to ask the candidate saying, the woman employee, whether will you be willing to take that role? So I think somewhere this is a culture, it'll take time for us to change, because this has come into us in so many years. So I think somewhere the policies will really help to, at least somewhere for us to go back and check, hey, you know what, these are the behaviors that I need to bring in. So I think that will help from that particular aspect. And probably, and the policy forming is also not like an individual standalone thing, because you're working on creating a policy is to different inputs that you get from different set of people, be it your leaders, managers, employees, employee resource groups, the right app resource groups, because probably you and me may not really understand because we don't belong to that particular community. So we think whatever we've read, we know that, but you need to get to them. So I think all of these inputs from all of these aspects will help us get to the right policy. And somewhere, I think that basically helps in the entire behavioral change that you want to kick in. Behaviors will take its own time, but probably policies are in one certain way that will make it a little faster to that extent. That would be my thought on it.
And thanks for that, Nandini. Before I ask you for specific examples from an HCL standpoint, let me pick up on something once again. Since Smita went first, I'll just ask the question. Smita talked about representation. And that's one thing I've heard across the diversity constituent spectrum, right? I've always heard this, nothing about us without us. So in this entire policy framework process, what does HCL do to ensure that the ERGs have solid input? Because I think that's where the unconscious bias you talked about becomes a genuine risk, right? There's you and I who are whatever we are, and we assume that we know on behalf of somebody else just because we don't get that. So how do you address that at HCL? And can you just continue and give us a couple more examples of things that you do at HCL that you found to be particularly effective?
Right. So we have a very strong ERG groups, and the ERGs are for different communities. So we have Pride at HCL for LGBTQ plus community. We have Ability Connect for PWD. We have for single parents or working parents. We also have for multicultural resource groups, because be it Black Network or Asian, Hispanic, Latinos, and so on, right? So we're kind of focusing on every different aspects that we can kind of bring people in there. And these ERGs are not only limited to the people in that community, but also the allies. And I think the allyship is something that we are strongly building, because there are people who believe and understand because of their own various reasons. Probably I may have a kid, or I may have a spouse, or I had a family member or whatever. So I kind of understand, and I want to be a part of this. So we build the allyship really strong. So the ERGs are built of employees from the community along with the allies. So every time, and these run, I mean, as an HR or as a DNI team, we only help support in having this group come together, but the group runs their own agenda and their own plan and what needs to be done, and have a regular connect on them. So when you have a regular connect, there are a lot of conversations that go on. And we also, because we are spread across the globe, across like 55 plus countries. So what we have is, we also have country level chapters that run, but we also have a common chapter that brings in all the country levels, because we also want to have that cross-cultural conversation that happens. And because when you're building a policy, typically the overarching policy is the same. You may have different country level policies which cater to the country nuances, but typically the essence and the philosophy will remain the same at an overall level. So that's why a cross chapter connect also that happens. Now, when you have these conversations that go on, there's a lot of ideas that come in and the aspects that need to be addressed. Probably a PWD employee is feeling this particular way and this policy is not really working right. So those inputs are collected on a regular basis. We also, as a DNI team, do is to keep benchmarking, keep studying what is happening in the market with all our fellow companies or from the consulting companies to understand what more can we add. I think the best part is also because we have something like a DNI board committee, which comprises of our chairperson herself. We have a couple of our directors, our CEO, CHRO, who catch up on a quarterly basis. And as a DNI team, we present on a quarterly basis and what is that we're doing, how well have we done, what are the new things or what are the updates. So we also get to hear from all our board members as well, saying, you know, these are something that, and many of our board members are in other boards as well. So we get a lot of inputs from all of them and the ERG groups, and that is how the policies are formed. In fact, when a policy team also has any small modifications, be it any modifications or new policies that are launched, are all first sent to the ERG groups to get their inputs and only then those changes are made. So that's a standard governance process that we have, that it is just not a couple of people, only leaders and stakeholders, but actually from the ground, you get those inputs before you make any modifications or bring in new policies. So yeah, the ERG groups run really strong from that particular aspect for us.
I think that's critical, right? Because if the ERG groups are strong, if the ERG groups are active, and then if the ERG groups are able to exercise their agency, then it's only going to result in definitely an equitable work environment. That's awesome. Thank you for that, Chandani. So I'm seeing a question from Navdeep, who's wondering how an organization handles differences of opinion with ERG leaders, ERG allies, and ERG members. I'm not going to pass that on to Chandani. I'm going to pass this on to Tina, because last week we were having a very spirited discussion that had to do with safe spaces. So Tina, could you just talk about the importance of safe spaces when it comes to building a diverse organization or creating the framework for a diverse organization, and then follow up with a couple of things that you guys are excited about at Thoughtworks?
Okay, safe spaces, a lot has to do with your organizational culture, and this doesn't happen overnight, right? It is a lot about, right, from what your employer brand is saying, what's your recruitment process, how do you onboard individuals into the organization, what are the best practices, what are some of the inclusive practices that are there, how do you create, and it's not just about HR, people, culture, it's also about within your teams and projects, how empowered do you feel, right? Is your voice heard? And many of you all may know that Thoughtworks follows the agile methodology. And so that methodology itself ensures that there is a lot of inclusion built into teams. And we've tried to add a lot more equity and inclusion to a lot of other areas within the DEI space and the talent space. But that said, safety comes from also communities that you build, right? And communities are your employee resource groups, are your affinity groups. How do you engage with the voice of dissent, right? When organizations make decisions around either okay, this is what we would do as a business, or this is what we will prioritize as an effort. For example, in Thoughtworks, we want to be 40% women and underrepresented gender minorities by end of 2022. Of course, that means that collectively everyone needs to put in effort, because this is not just about hiring and bringing in more women and underrepresented gender minorities, but it's also about retention. How do you create a safe space for people to belong, to retain, to grow? And which means that everyone needs to be bought into that charter. And so today, in fact, we announced our global disability inclusion affinity group, and which means both visible and invisible, which means that there is a core group that's collectively driving efforts in the disability inclusion space, which also means that they are creating the safe spaces for people to have conversations. A very important note on this is also about leadership, right? How approachable is leadership within the organization? How do you ensure that that you can have open conversations with leadership? You can challenge and question leadership at the same time. All of this is, some part is culture, some part is the leadership team that you build, some part is about empowerment and empathy and compassion that you offer to your colleagues, and of course a lot of is interwoven into your DEI principles and practices. But there's no straight answer to that, Amar, unfortunately.
But I think if there's one thing I'm taking away from what you said, if you allow me to paraphrase Tina, it's that a safe space is where competing voices can dissent respectfully, and then ensure that at the end of the day we're doing the right thing. So I hope that answered Navdeep's question. Thank you very much for that, Tina. I'm going to come back to you because something else just crossed my mind. But I'm going to go over to Nandini Sarkar just now. And I'm going to start off with an audience question, Nandini. Ishwaran is asking, how does an organization start building a D&I strategy? And I think that's a an important takeaway that we could perhaps help the listeners today put together for themselves as they work in their own organization. So as you talk about what you do at Boeing, how does it all start? Well, you got to start somewhere. So what's the best place to start?
So, I mean, that's the integral part of how are we laying the path for success ahead as we build diverse teams and advance global teaming and collaboration across the space. So the starting point of a strategy, at least from my experience, has been to understand the nature of business, understand the existing people issues, understand where the revenue generation happens and how, understand who are your critical stakeholders in the game of things, understand your competitors in the marketplace, because having an overall view of how the business performance is, definitely to understand, I would put it into two words, having a business acumen and knowing your business right sets the path for charting out your strategy. Now, as you chart out your strategy, the second critical path would be what would be those foundational pillars that will drive you to the aspiration which the leadership of the organization envisions. And when you have those foundational strategic pillars, it talks about the need for charting out what are those levers that would lead you to that. So having an understanding of business from internal to the environment and also the external environment, having an understanding of people dynamics, understanding the people issues, you create those foundational pillars. Once your foundational pillars are there, is when you go charting out the levers that are resources available within the organization and those that you need to innovate. And as you go through this process, it is very critical to have your key stakeholders mapped in and bought into the idea of why you're suggesting a path, which could be a 3 years or a 5 years roadmap. And again, remaining open to the fact that nothing is etched in stone, because the business dynamics are very volatile. Given today's world, we know we are grappling with things unseen, unprecedented. So I think more of preparedness to take on the challenge that we are set to kind of address. Also having a certain amount of risk appetite to try out certain things, and also to have that psychological safety embedded in the cultural fabric of the organization, where each one of us are safe and feel okay to fail if things don't work. And as you go about doing that, now comes the point where you would want to implement, create an implementation plan and deployment. That's when you look at the low-hanging fruits that are within your control to be able to understand, to impact faster than the rest. Like a culture transformation takes a lot of time. And it requires not only deployment and implementation, it requires stabilization and then sustaining through the path. So all those needs to be worked out in phases to be able to chart out an organizational strategy for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hope that answers the question.
Oh yes, in more ways, but unfortunately, it's also given me 3 more questions. So with one more. The path to, so it's essentially this entire diversity, equity, and inclusion is a journey. You keep innovating, you keep adapting and doing all of that. And this is back to you, Nandini, for a company that is embarking on setting up a DEI framework, what are 2 or 3 common pitfalls that they absolutely need to avoid?
The first pitfall, which is very crucial, is to ensure that the organization, the leadership, is listening. Listening sounds very simple, but we at Boeing believe that seeking, speaking, and listening are those three magical habits, which is, kind of guided by a scientific approach to ensure we are not missing on those voices unheard. And I think the seed of inclusion and equity lies in there, because the moment you're hearing the unheard, the moment you're listening and are able to assess and understand the social sentiment of the people, who's your critical USP to drive business outcomes, becomes an important part. So that is one of the pitfalls. So keep listening, have those ears to the ground, understand the social sentiment, and see what makes business sense. Definitely working out a risk management plan, because we as DEI practitioners need to be on both sides of the table, understanding what the people needs, at the same time understanding, the risk, management for the organization. So marrying of that creates a healthy environment. So the pitfall is, don't avoid listening, please listen. The second would be in terms of ensuring that you have the right stakeholders mapped, and this is very critical. So I kind of reiterate, it cannot be created in the bubble of HR only. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is an imperative for business, and we have to have the business buy-in to ensure that your strategy doesn't fail. So have your stakeholders mapped. Here, the stakeholders are your business, because we here are not only HR who understands the people's strategy, but we are here to make business succeed. So we need to partner for their success and understand the business, talk their language, to have those critical components of sponsors, executive champions, to lead through that change, because it's all about change and culture transformation. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Nandini. There's a bunch of questions flowing in, but I'm going to try and channel that. I'm going to look at the opportunity factor now, because I think it's fairly clear that technology and the pandemic together, ironically, destroyed pretty much every entry barrier towards actually creating a truly, diverse workforce. It flattened the world, opened things up. So I want to pass this on to Smita. Smita, how do you boundaryless workforces and the gig economy? How can an organization leverage that opportunity while at the same time remain true to its core culture of being diverse and inclusive? Slightly wonky question, but I think it's important, because as we, I think I'm sensing a theme, lots of HR folks here. Hey, it's NHRD, what do I know? So point being, every single person here is looking for diverse workforces and pools. So any thoughts on how we can leverage the gig economy, but how do we integrate even gig workers into our cultures?
So if you go back and look at most organizations, right, and them looking to come back and start work, everyone's talking about a hybrid workforce. So when you talk about hybrid, it means that you will have some people who might be totally remote. You will have some people who might be, working, the hybrid model, which is a couple of days in the office and a couple of days, in close to remote or, close to office. And then you have some people who are going to be in the office because of the nature of the role. And what all of this has done is it's actually asked most, people and human resource professionals and leaders to actually start relooking at some of the policies that they had crafted. So which meant that you had employees, you worked with them in a certain manner, you had, and they worked 8 number of hours, you used contract workers for X amount of people. Now, what's also happened is we've got generational diversity as well in a workforce. So it's no more that you're just talking about men, women, community, regional, people with disability, or the other forms of diversity that you can think of, but you're also talking about generational diversity. And there is a section of the the millennials and Gen Z, who are basically looking at working on short gigs. They're extremely talented people. Now, if you want the best talent, then your policies also need to change. So which means that you might have somebody who will come and work with you for 4 months or 6 months and travel for the next 6 months because they made whatever they need to. And I know a lot of these young kids because they have worked in a few GCCs that we've set up, or they're also working with some of the other accounts that we're working with. So it's no more that you can say that, a policy fits A, and it needs to be a lot more inclusive in that manner. Second, what we've seen is, with the entire Great Resignation and with the power shift actually being with the hands of the employees and not so much the employer anymore, where I think the employee with its 5, 6, 8, 10 offers based on like Ravana's heads, the number of offers that you can get for one role. Typically, we are getting to see that, they call the shots. And if you have an extremely talented individual, and if that individual only wants to do a gig work, organizations and actually traditional enterprises are actually having those roles open. So you've also mapped for certain roles, whether you want to have a gig worker or whether you want to have, a full-time employee. What this also translates to is on the employee culture. So you can't be rigid. You can't say one size fits all. You need to have an adaptive culture, which helps you actually integrate people who are in different roles who are also coming in to be doing many functions. So I am seeing, people doing a lot of experiments. So as much as, and I heard just this morning we had HR and DEI and, a lot of those leaders came together. So as much as we're talking about the Great Resignation, I think we're also talking about the Great Experiment, because a lot of unknowns, a lot of new models, there is no one person who survived or who's conquered or who's worked through all of those. So it just gives us a lot more opportunities to try new things to see how we can integrate all of these as well.
I think that's very helpful, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you cannot afford to be rigid, either in your thinking or in your policy framework. So, and I think you need to be able to adapt on the fly in order to truly leverage the enormous potential that the current scenario offers to us. Going back to you, Tina, I'm going to take a question from the audience and flow it back to you. Common question that you see when you're addressing the undercurrents in any organization when you're rolling out diversity initiatives. This one is about the other side of the gender diversity question. Do organizations do any research on workplace issues faced by men? And do there need to be strategies around helping men manage workplace issues? Now, I have an opinion, but I'd rather hear from you first.
Interesting, because someone was asking me about gender neutral and gender specific policies. So I don't think there's any such thing as gender neutral. That could be in some contexts, but it's important to keep gender in mind when you frame policies. And I'm talking about everyone, the entire gender spectrum. And so in that context, yes, I think you need to hear the voices of everyone, because everyone's voices are important. For example, right, many years back, and talking about, probably 18, 19 years back, when we were relooking at the, prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace policy for Thoughtworks, we looked at it with the lens of, keeping the gender spectrum in mind. So we said anyone can be sexually harassed within the organization. And so we will have a gender neutral policy. And I'm talking then when, there was, when we were just looking at prevention of sexual harassment from the lens of, oh, this is legal compliance. We just need to keep, this is something that we need to do as an organization. So yes, it's important. We also have a program that's called Vapasi, which is, and I'm just giving some stories and anecdotes, right? Because it is true that the workplace historically has been built for men by men, right? From the AC temperatures that are set as standard temperatures, right? It is set for men, not for anyone else. So if you ask me, oh, are we looking at policies for men? I would say Yes, let's level the playing field first before we really, and I'm sorry, but I have to be honest about this. It isn't a level playing field yet. And with the pandemic, we've seen how many women have quit the workforce. So
No, and I want to say a big shout out to you for calling that out. I'm so tempted to play devil's advocate, but I can't with a straight face because I completely agree with you. But I'm going to ask you, I'm going to take something that you raised. I was going to ask my friend Chandini Kamal and put her on the spot a little bit. Chandini, the Great Resignation has hit India, and unfortunately, it's destroying what were earlier healthy diversity ratios, right? Would you agree? And how can we leverage the ability to be flexible? How can we leverage returnship programs? What do we need to do to ensure that we don't lose the gains, hard-fought gains of the last 10 years? And I completely agree with Tina. We are all seeing that women leaving. We cannot have that happen. So what's your perspective?
Right, and I probably, we'll start.
I did say I'm going to put you on the spot, right? So there you go.
Right. No, so probably I'll start with saying, yeah, I agree to Tina exactly about, creating a level playing field. A lot of people still have a problem saying, why are these policies only for women and not for a man? I mean, why are they not gender neutral? I mean, it needs to be, but you can't really have everything as a gender neutral. You need to keep in mind. So I'll give you an example now. Let's say a typical research has always shown saying, if a man is ready, 60% for a role, will go ahead and apply for it. A woman, even if she's 80 to 90% ready, will still think, hey, what can I really apply for this role? And will always step back. And that is why you need to have a career development program for a woman, right? I mean, the question is always, do men not need training? They need, but look at these research numbers that have shown. So I think you need to have those specifics that will really cater to different audience. It could be gender, it could be PWD, LGBTQ, anyone. So you need to really look at them and have those programs really created. Now, when you're talking about the resignation, of course, all of us are into it. There's a lot of churn. I mean, how many people going in and how many people coming in? So people are going and they're coming somewhere. Now, if you see, typically, I would, if I'm not exaggerating, but at least 80% of women still leave the organization. They don't sit back at home. They always leave for better opportunity or a higher salary. So it is not about women leaving the workforce, women leaving your organization. I think it's more about that. Yeah, there is a limited number of people who are leaving the workforce, but I think I would take that a little bit more temporary because of this pandemic phase right now, which is also getting back to normalcy. I think the only thing that we can do is to help on creating a flexi working. And that's where probably the hybrid working is going to help because, why did this all happen? Because in a pandemic, probably I was at home. I had to take care of my family, my kids, cooking, everything as a woman and take care of work. And that's why I probably wanted to take a break. So this flexi working will really help. Part-time working will help to a large extent. But exactly as you pointed out on returnship, I think returnship is also something wherein now, when people have all come to a level, to an extent saying, okay, now I understand now what the situation is, what the place looks like. Can I come back to work? A lot of people who had taken a break in the peak pandemic or probably even earlier. I mean, I'm not going to be just focusing on the pandemic era, but also the earlier. So these returnship programs are really doing well. I think one differentiator that at HCL we have from a returnship program is the aspect that we don't just pick people and put them into the roles, but we train them. It is not only about, a brush up saying you knew it already, so we're just brushing you up and then now you're getting into the workforce, but we will train you totally to a different thing, whichever field that you want to be in, whichever, language you want to kind of learn, we will teach you, upskill you on that particular thing, cross skill you, and then place you. So I think that's an edge that we are kind of managing to get, is about, letting women employees come back saying, you know what, I want to do something totally different. And probably the world is also changing. We are in a dynamic world, especially in an IT field where every day there's something totally new. So this returnship with this additional edge is helping. But I think as an overall response to your question, Namar, would be about women are not leaving the workforce, they're only leaving your organization. And I think you need to be looking at what can you do, probably like an ML return. I think we have a program for women coming back from their ML. I think we have one of the best numbers in the industry about women coming back and staying in the organization for a longer phase. And how do we manage to do that? Probably getting them the right roles in the right places. And probably if I look at just India aspect, women employees, we start off at 50-50. Typically, the fresher hiring is 50-50, but as you move up the ladder, I think really hats off for 35%. If we reach even half of it, I think we will be celebrating. Yeah, so the numbers keep coming down is all because, we're not able to support them on, a woman gets married, she has to move to her husband's location. Are we able to accommodate her in that local location? Probably yes, if that will work, that really helps. Women take break because of their MLs. Are we able to support them during their ML period? Right? When they come back, are we able to give them the right role? We are a 24/7 industry, right? So we need to have night shifts. But can we have a guideline saying, hey, you know what, when a woman comes back from her maternity, don't put her on a night shift for the first 1 year when the baby is 1 year old, because you can put a baby in a daycare in the day, but not at the night. That's why it's called daycare and not 24/7 care, right?
I really never made that connection. Thanks, Chandni. Makes so much sense.
So I think those are some important, just you need to be a little, sensitive and look at those aspects. And probably all of these will not really happen. And that's where it's all about cultural change. You need to make, have those advocacy. I think advocacy is one of the most important things. Until unless you're not talking about it, it's not going to happen. As a manager, I need to get my work done. It doesn't matter to me, you're a man, you're a woman, or who it is. I need my job done. I have a night shift. You have a baby, you don't have a baby, it's not my concern. My concern is business. I think that's where we need to kind of, talk about it, saying it is your concern. You're a manager, and do you have a guidebook for those managers saying, these are some times that you really need to be supporting someone, because we all support each other in some way or the other for whatever. If a man can also have some emergencies and would take time off. So, let's kind of build that culture in the organization that I am there to support and build that enabling environment. I think that's most important. It's not a day's job. It'll take its own course, but I think the journey needs to begin. I think that's the most important aspect. So I think in the earlier question, I was just saying in the earlier question, someone had asked about, what is that I should be looking at when I create my D&I framework. So just to add to what Nandini said, I think the first thing that you need to do is do not look at the numbers. That is not important. Numbers will follow. What is important is, are you able to build that culture in your organization, build that framework, build that groundwork, right? Talk about it. The networking, advocacy, one of the most important aspects. Take your time. Nothing will change in a day. Take your time. Give that 2-3 years, depending on which industry, which maturity level your organization is at. Give 2-3 years on building the ground, and then start looking at numbers and pushing on numbers. Otherwise, it'll all come back saying, you know what, you're all just behind numbers. And honestly, D&I is not a number game at all. It's only an end product, or probably it's just a reassurance saying that you're going in the right direction. That is it. But number is never important. What is important is building that culture.
Wow, that's a brave statement, Chandni. Numbers are not important. I suspect our boards might have a minorly contrarian view to that one thing, but I'm not arguing with you. I believe it's about how an organization is perceived internally and externally, and that's how you move something forward. Smita typed something that I'm going to pick up. It's a hot topic, and I've got another question for you. I'm going to take that over to Nandini Sarkar. Nandini, pay parity. How badly off are we? Gender pay parity, women and men, how badly off are we?
So we already have data and statistics to suggest that we are not doing well when we talk about pay parity.
I'm putting it very mildly, Nandini.
Is it okay now?
And I said that's putting it very mildly. I agree with you.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought my voice is not traveling. Okay. Yeah. So I think something that has been built over a period of time, decade after decade, needs some time to be recorrected. What I see very critical here is the intent of ensuring that we want to assess where the gender pay gap lies. There are some countries where the pay gap assessment is a compliance need. India is not one of them. So as organizations who are operating out of India, do we keep it as waiting list whenever there's a compliance need is when we look at it? Or do we say and position ourselves as inclusive organizations by saying, at least let us assess. Because the first question that comes across to us is, if we assess, then what? Definitely there would be a need for bridging the gap, which is a cost to the company. And I'm talking very basic here, because an approach to understanding the equitable approaches to create that level playing field would have a cost implication to the company. How much is the appetite of the company, of the treasury, to take that hit?
So let me ask you that question. Yes,
Okay.
there is a cost involved, but isn't that the inflection point where a company puts their money where their mouth is?
I guess you have kind of, again, come back to another point where we talk about the retention strategy and the strategy towards attraction. So I kind of combine both those components, because when you do those marketplace benchmarking in terms of how your comp and ben, CTCs are, the median points and things, and then you have regular market corrections, is a way to kind of create a lesser gap. So there is a bigger gap. And what we could do is being intentional, having those benchmarking done, doing an almost apple to apple comparison in terms of industry and the company environment, and specifically the talent pool that you need to attract. Because it may so happen that I come from an aerospace and defense company, industry, but the talent pool that we attract are predominantly engineering and tech, which is IT. So my competitors are defined in a different way. And I cannot say I would only go by aerospace and defense as an industry type. So, I mean, to cut it short, simply, there is no straight off-the-shelf solution if you want to address an equity issue. You have to look inward, see what makes sense for the leadership business environment, because we would definitely have the long range business plan, right? Everything has to sit into it and see what are those small tweaks that we could make in the process to be able to close on the gaps. So the first thing is to recognize and accept there is a gap. That's being intentional. The second is the intent to address it, seeing what is that win-win situation where you are able to keep your talent attracted, you're able to attract newer talent from the marketplace, depending on what is your long-term business plan. At the same time, there is not a major hit in the cost implication, because overhead cost is something that we all look into. And once we've achieved that, is to see how we continue that as a process, basically setting those things right with respect to process inequities. And that's how you kind of bring it back to rails. Yeah.
And that makes sense, because once again, we've all agreed that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a journey, and you can't control what you can't measure, what you don't measure. So start by measuring it, and then over a period of time, it's going to take, I think Tina was it, that decades of work has to be undone. And in the same breath, we've also got to acknowledge that we've all got to earn a living, as do the companies we work for, and so on and so forth. Someone here is being pessimistic and saying the level playing field is a mirage when you're dealing with people. I'm going to disagree, because I believe that the intent for the level playing field is there. It's just that the road to that level playing field can be devilishly tricky. And we'll get to that in a minute. But before that, I want to bounce back to Smita. Smita, you talked about advocates, and I couldn't agree with you more. A good friend of mine from HCL once told me that women in the workplace and in leadership are over-mentored and under-sponsored. And that sort of ties in with what you're saying, because advocacy is actually doing something about this. So how do we address at an organization level this big gap? Because see, we do well at the entry level, and then when it comes to that time in women's lives when they decide to get married, or or like Chandni pointed out, it's time for them to start families, that's when they kind of fall off the radar. And then we potentially don't do enough to re-equip them once they emerge again and want to re-engage. So how does sponsorship, as opposed to the more passive mentorship, work in that sort of a construct in the industry, Smita?
I think a large part of what I really saw, a lot of work in action was during my stint at Thoughtworks, right? And, and I had a sponsor and who was part of the leadership team, either in India or globally. And the sponsor kind of works with you to look at a 2-year career map, to see what is the learning, what is the growth path, where is it that you want to go after 2 years, in your career, what is the learning aids or the support that you require during that period of time. Is there something that they can provide internally? It could be in the form of women leadership programs or giving you exposure to certain functions that will help you build yourself as the individual that you need to be to taking on that role. Or it could be seeking help from external, coaches or leadership team to help you get mentored, so that when you're on that journey, you are groomed, you are prepared to actually take on. And if you look at an organization like Thoughtworks, for example, and because I stayed there and, I did get to see and they celebrate for every woman leader who, goes through that journey, who gets sponsored, and who goes through that entire journey that they map for themselves. There is a cheer, and typically you see something more than allyship, which is actually somebody advocating for you, looking for your best interest, invested in your growth. And I'll give you a classic case. So we had a chief of staff. She had just returned. She was a mother returning from her maternity break, and she was the chief of staff to our India MD. And the India MD is, a paired role in Thoughtworks, and and both the gentlemen would look at their careers. Would look at their schedules to map what would help the woman returnee who's joining them back as a new mom. Looking at the times that she's having those 3 periods of time, working with her to actually help her grow and mentor and grow in her career. Identify additional roles 2 years down the line where she can actually take on. She went on to be leading our entire engineering for research role, and then she went on to be even being a market partner for one of the regions. So all of this doesn't happen overnight. It's also about leaders being invested. And I think once as a woman leader you've reached a position, I think it's all about paying it forward. Can you then pick 2 or 3 women who are part of your team or who have identified, your organization has identified? Can you mentor them? Can you be, talking through being in the shoes of the individual and talking through your experience of what worked for you? It doesn't mean that your experience is the same experience they're going to have, but they can learn from it so that they don't have to go through the same hardship. Maybe it'll be something else, but you've got a lot more wisdom where you've gone to, because of your journey, and possibly you can help them on that journey. So I think it's one about leaders being committed, and sponsorship works if you have the right intent. And the second is, of course, women paying it forward. And for me, both of these are important if you're going to be talking about advocacy.
Women paying it forward, we could have a whole separate panel discussion on that, right? Because the late Madeleine Albright said something that it still boggles my mind. And she said that there's a special place in hell reserved for women who don't help other women. And that's a sad fact of life, right? We don't see enough of that happening. So for all women leaders on the call, just like someone gave you a leg up, I told a bunch of high performance women leaders yesterday at one of our internal programs, you know what, ask for a bigger table and have a woman come and share that with you. Don't hesitate from paying that forward. Going to go back to Tina for a minute. Someone in the audience believes that The issue HR teams face is that the DEI cause is sometimes cosmetic lip service that is washed away in the face of cost pressures. That was definitely, I think it's a real question. And if someone's asked it, it's happening somewhere.
Oh, it does happen. It does happen. And, you know, a lot of people reach out to me one-on-one, asking me to, you know, mentor them and coach them in their, to support them through their DEI journey in their organizations. A lot of times they're not sponsored. So they form these networks within the organization, and some of them reach out. In fact, I'm part of a group called the Advisory Collective, where a couple of DEI leads and leaders in the space are providing free consulting for especially for groups that need support in the space and are looking at DEI. One of the trends that we do see is this, right, where you know, DEI is either seen as a number game, where you know, you're talking about your numbers, or you're celebrating, right? You have, this is Pride Month, we're celebrating, our logo has the Pride flag in the background. That is not solidarity, and that will not sustain. And so I've been, you know, working with these folks to tell them, you know, there are two approaches that I see that works very well, right? One is leadership driven, where leaders in the organization absolutely believe that DEI is something from a business strategy, from a business value perspective, to engagement, to retention, to employee experience, right? These aspects, to culture, of course, these aspects definitely show an improvement and overall show improvements in returns in multiple ways. So that is one aspect where it's leadership driven. The other is that it's employee driven, where communities come together. You have ERGs, you know that they care deeply and they want to see changes within their organization. And it works beautifully when you have an amalgamation of both come together. But yes, there is, and the reality is it won't take you far if you are just, you know, DI is a lip service or it's just a number game, because the more you hire, you will see it's like an you know, broken bucket, or, you know, it's like a funnel. People will keep coming and people will keep leaving. And it's very, very important then for organizations to see, okay, I made this investment, what is the ROI of that? And I don't think, you know, of course it's the right thing to do. And an organization needs to look at it with the lens of how important is DEI from the role that we as an organization need to play in terms of systemic change that we bring about in our world and in our society. But it also makes great business sense. So how do you tie these two together and invest in your DEI strategy becomes important.
Thanks for that, Tina. So let's, once again, we've got about 10 minutes to go. I want to sort of connect a few dots and then try and give it a wrap. The broader DE&I spectrum, okay, and I shouldn't say spectrum, the broader platform, right? You're talking neurodiversity, you're talking cultural diversity, you're talking about people with disabilities, you're talking about, so there's a lot of focus on the gender question, and as it should be. But if we are talking about building a diverse work pool or workforce pool that you can leverage, what I'm going to ask each of you, outside of gender diversity, starting with maybe you, Chandani, give us an example of something that you're doing for one of the other constituents.
Right. I think you're right. Gender becomes one of the most, I think, low-hanging fruits also, because we are 50-50 in the world, but that's not what we are in the organization. So I think I think it's a very logical thing to have gender first. I think the other one that is a little focus is also from a PWD aspect, which is people with disability. And that is also, I think somewhere the governments are also pushing us to do that, because they're looking at least having 2% of your workforce to be PWD. So I think there is an push which is coming from all directions. So I think that becomes another aspect to it. LGBTQ today, to a large extent, well, most of the countries in the world, the maturity levels may be different. But I think that is something which is really coming up, and I think we can see that very clearly in our movies. So it's a reflection of our society, and I think we should be able to accept that bit of it. Neurodiversity, of course, I think very important, and probably it's a little newer field, and there's a little bit more work that needs to be done. Getting a talent pool in the market is slightly difficult, but I think similarly for probably in certain niche skills, be it anything, it's just a resource. Also getting a niche skill is difficult. So when we can take that efforts of finding a resource or training them internally, creating a talent pipeline, internal or external, when you're working on it, so why not for these communities as well? Probably not from India, probably from more of a US aspect would be on the multicultural, be it from Black, Hispanic, Latinos, Asian, white. So I think those will be another important aspect that we need to kind of look at. It also depends on at what level is your organization, what is your business, how does it kind of flow? And I think that will typically take, will help you understand where your priority 1, 2, 3, 4 will fall in. And probably when I say priority 1, 2, 3, doesn't mean that I will give more focus here and less here, but the kind of initiative that are going to be doing, the kind of efforts of pushing these numbers. I mean, yeah, of course, numbers is the final reflection, but are you able to create that environment? So probably let's say from a PWD aspect, it's not about being able to hire those people, but it's also about is your organization infrastructurally and technologically accessible? Have you built that? Have you built a safe environment for the LGBTQ community to be working in your organization? So I think everything has to fall in. You can never let go of any diversity pillar for that matter. But I think the most important aspect here would be, now that we have focused so much on all different diversity pillars, it is important that the inclusion is one of the most the highest priority that you've given is for inclusion, because there's no point you hire people and of diverse group and you're not able to get, have a collaborative work environment. So inclusion, as they say, right? If you're not actively including, you're accidentally excluding, right? So I think that our focus needs to be on inclusion. Once somewhere I kind of feel probably maybe a little different, that you work on diversity and inclusion will happen, but I think it's if you're inclusive, diversity will automatically happen. So let's reverse the way we think, and I think a lot of organizations have also started saying, rather than DEI or DNI, to IND. So inclusion comes prior to diversity. So I think if you're able to solve that, or if you're able to crack that right thing.
I believe inclusion is diversity in action. It's an action
Absolutely.
word.
True. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Chandani. Smita, something non-gender pillar related that Answer is doing that we can take away as a potential best practice.
So we are asking them to look at people from the community, for example, working with the LGBTQ plus community, for example, right across their organization. So it doesn't just have to be at, working at, your engineers or anybody, even housekeeping staff. So if you see some of the housekeeping staff, because we provide business support services and facility management, because it's part of the offering that we have, a couple of our clients have actually welcomed that idea. So there is inclusion that's happening right at the grassroots. And it's also about, so there is a lot of, training and sensitization, which is happening right from grassroots to partners to the entire ecosystem and the office that they're trying to work, with, right? So it's not just about people, because I think there is one aspect, which is your, people from your technology segment, which is, I think, a lot of work which is happening in that space, be it with, creating internship opportunities or, looking to hire very specific technology folks. But we're also getting to hear that there is high attrition as well in that space. But it's also about trying to see what we can do at the grassroots, because then you make a larger impact back at society as well, where you're creating a lot more inclusive nature, where you're giving opportunities to these people who could be transgender or who could be from the community to actually come and be a part of our organization. And which means that, more it becomes mainstream, more opportunities that are going to be available for them.
Thanks for that, Smita. I'll over to Nandini. Nandini, some word of wisdom on one of the other pillars.
So beyond gender, for gender, we have a Mission 30 aspiration internal to Boeing in India. Besides that, what we try and tackle are the aspects of generation. Culture is an overarching theme that we try and control because we believe through culture you are able to sustain the diverse talent pool that you attract to your environment. So generation, culture, person with disability, and LGBTQ plus inclusion remains very strong on the cards, along with veterans inclusion, given we have a prominent presence of the defense side of our business in India as well. And what we typically do is we are now getting into the mode of understanding how does our diversity demographics look like? Because gender is easily measurable. We know for attracting social security schemes, we do identify ourselves by gender, which is primarily gender binary. Having said that, we've provisioned for that in our tools to go beyond gender and do self-identification on a voluntary note to ensure that we know what are those spectrum that we already have in our critical mass. Because we believe if we have those numbers in sight, it would enable us to chart out those equitable approaches as we try and bridge gaps with respect to certain systemic inequities. So we are doing that. Apart from the BR, we already heard about employee resource groups. In Boeing world, we call them the business resource groups, and we heavily tie them into creating business impact. So we have a business alignment officer who are embedded in the structure of our business resource group, who works very heavily with the people strategist, which is our HR head, and diversity, equity, and inclusion office, ensuring that we not lose sight of the vision and the mission we have charted out for the region. So apart from that, what we do is we also have a very strong network of inclusion ambassadors who are scoping in a lot of things from a conversation starter standpoint that addresses various nuances of multi-dimensions of diversity and intersectionalities. Because intersectionality is a critical component. Whatever is visible as a diversity dimension. But when we talk about invisible diversity dimension, there is a critical component of intersectionality. So we want to address that, and the strong network of inclusion ambassadors address all those uncomfortable table topics, bringing in our people from across tiers to have those conversations through storytelling, through personal anecdotes and experiences so far. And that is how we kind of strengthen our listening skills to catch on those vibes and see what we could be doing differently each day for better business outcomes.
No, that's powerful stuff, Nandini. Thank you. And finally, we're almost out of time, but I do want to hear from Tina. Tina, words of wisdom, so that I can, and then give me something really good that I can wrap with, right?
Too much pressure. In addition to the focus that we have on women and underrepresented gender minorities, each of the regions are encouraged to have an additional goal. So across our 17 regions, you would see, a diversity of areas that they focus on. For Ecuador, for example, it's indigenous people. For China, it is people with disability. For North America, it's Black and Latino. For Singapore, it's immigrants and expats. So you would see that there is a global focus and then there is a regional focus as well. And I think that really helps, because sometimes you are very committed to the cause that is important in your region, or an underrepresented group in your region, right? So there is the whole global focus and the regional focus as well. In India, we have our focus is LGBTQ plus inclusion, and we've done a lot of effort and work in this space. In fact, we recently released a case study that IAM did on Thoughtworks LGBTQ plus inclusion. That's on the Harvard Business Review, website. And this is about best practices around LGBTQ plus inclusion with a case study. But I think more than anything else, it's very important to like Nandini said, look at intersectionality, because all of us, there are so many lived experiences and social identities that we carry, and it's very, very critical that we are able to bring this to our workplaces as much as we want to. If we don't want to, that's fine. It's also important that we look at some of the areas of intersections, for example, mental health and well-being, right? We've seen during the pandemic how critical that is. And how do we ensure that mental health and well-being is something that we offer to everybody? In terms of a framework or a holistic approach, we often talk about numbers, and I have to say that Thoughtworks is so hell-bent upon this 40% WUGM in tech, right? Like women and underrepresented gender minorities in tech. But it also holds us accountable. We say that, this is going to be on our website, this is going to be on our social impact reports, this is going to be everywhere. So we look at not only finding and nurturing diverse talent, but we also look at creating inclusion and belonging. How do you ensure you have a space where people, cultivate each other, a safe space for all? Advancement and opportunity is important, because you need to have equal as well as equitable opportunities for all. And retention and people policies sort of bind it all together, where you look at inclusive people policies, all of that. But you also need to have governance. You need to have your DEI councils, you need to have your ERGs and your networks. So it becomes very critical that you look at it from a holistic sense. And unless you do that, you will have gaps within your whole DEI approach. So it's also important to critically look at it from the lens of your organization. Your organization is unique, your business model is unique, the customers you work with are unique. So I think bringing in that holistic sense is very, very critical in the DEI space.
Thank you for that, Tina. And wow, I mean, what an absolutely incredibly engaging session. If I were to try and sum this up, Anu Kumar is going to come. She stays very close by. She's going to come looking for me with a bat, because I'll need a full half an hour. I'm going to try and just connect a few dots. I think it's very, very clear that DE&I is a journey that's never going to end. You just get better. You adapt. You modify. You make these changes. But I think it's hugely important, and I think all the panelists have agreed that the demonstration of intent, it starts with that. And I think I completely agree with Nandini when she said what you cannot measure, you cannot control. I love what Tina said, where she says the numbers hold you accountable. And I kind of think that's Thoughtworks' version of the Hawthorne effect, right? Shine a light, place the numbers, see the needle move. And I think those are such valuable lessons for all of us to take away. But I think, just to summarize, I think it's hugely important to understand that companies are different. We go together as different, we as different companies with different cultures, we are unique, and we contribute towards a diverse Indian industry ecosystem. And we need to be able to celebrate the differences, but create that safe working environment where everybody, regardless of what constituency or what pillar they represent or belong to, they have the same opportunities for advancement, enrichment, and success. Once again, thank you very much for your time today. Tina, Nandini, Chandani, Smita, Anu Kumar, and Lionel, and the NHRDN team, thank you so much for the opportunity. I know there are unanswered questions, but I'm guessing you guys can find a way to reach out to Tina, reach out to Smita, and ask these questions. Keep the conversation going, because only when we keep talking about this, we're going to get better. Thank you very much, folks. Have a great evening, and we'll see you around.
Thank you, everyone, from